The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Subspace follows predictable patterns. Warp fields generate consistent signatures. Even the Bajoran wormhole, with its seemingly impossible stable terminus, obeys quantum mechanics when properly analyzed. But what happens when something tears through the fabric of reality itself, broadcasting impossible readings and carrying technology that defies every principle the Federation has spent centuries perfecting? Deep Space Nine sensors screened warnings at 0347 hours station time. Major. Ensign Tenmiai's voice cut through the operations center's ambient hum. I'm reading a massive subspace distortion, bearing 173 Mark 8. It's not a wormhole. It's not anything in our database. Major Kira Nerys leaned over the ops console, her Bajoran earring catching the blue light of the sensor displays. On screen. The view screen shifted from the serene backdrop of the Denorio's belt to something that made everyone on the bridge pause. Space was tearing. Not collapsing into a singularity or warping around a ship dropping from warp, literally ripping open like fabric under stress, edges crackling with energy that registered across every spectrum simultaneously. Chronoton particles spiking, Lieutenant Nog reported from the engineering station, his Ferengi ears twitching with concern. Tachyon emissions off the scale. Whatever's coming through isn't using conventional warp technology. The tear widened, and through it came something that belonged in a museum. The vessel that emerged was massive, over 300 meters of retrofitted warship, its hull bearing the unmistakable styling of mid-20th century Earth naval architecture. But where rust and ocean damage should have claimed such a relic centuries ago, this ship gleamed with impossible functionality. Its bow thrust forward in the aggressive lines of ancient naval warfare, but crackling energy signatures surrounded it like a shroud. At its stern, 3 massive engine assemblies pulsed with blue-white light that made the sensors register readings usually reserved for warp core breaches. I'm picking up audio transmission, Tenmei said. It's in Japanese. Old Earth Japanese. Pre-unification dialect. Put it through, Kira ordered. Static filled the operations center, then a voice, strained, disciplined, carrying the weight of command pushed to its limits, Kochira wa Chikyu Beigun Senkan Yamato. Genzaiki Fume. Sashin Kanona Sendantai wa Odo Seo. Kurika Shimasu. Universal Translator is processing, Nog said. Give it a moment to, there. The voice shifted into Federation standard, though the formal cadence remained. This is Earth Defense Forces Battleship Yamato. Current position unknown. Any Earth forces capable of communication, please respond. Repeat, this is the Yamato. We are far from home and require navigational assistance to continue our mission to Iscandar. Kira exchanged glances with Nog. Earth Defense Forces. That designation hasn't been used since before the Federation was founded. The ship's configuration matches historical records, Nog said, his fingers dancing across the console. But that's impossible. The Yamato was a World War II battleship. It was sunk in Earth's Pacific Ocean in 1945. It shouldn't exist, let alone be capable of faster-than-light travel. Apparently someone rebuilt it, Kira said. Hail them. Let them know they've made contact with the Federation. Channel open. Battleship Yamato, this is Major Kira Nerys of Deep Space Nine, a Federation starbase. You've emerged in Bajoran space, far from Earth. We're reading significant damage to your vessel and detecting radiation exposure throughout your hull. Do you require assistance? Silence stretched for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then, Federation. Major, we have no record of any Federation in our database. Please clarify, what is your relationship to Earth? Are you an ally of the Gamilas Empire? The Gamilas? Kira looked at Nog, who shook his head. The name meant nothing. We have no knowledge of any Gamilas Empire. The Federation is an alliance of over 150 worlds, founded by Earth, Vulcan, Andoria, and Tellar. Earth is our capital world, located in the Sol system. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried a note of desperate hope barely restrained by military discipline. Earth still exists. The Sol system is intact. Yes, Kira said carefully, something in that question sending a chill through her. Earth is thriving. It's been the heart of the Federation for over 200 years. The silence that followed felt different. Heavier. Major, Nog said quietly, I'm reading life signs aboard that ship. Approximately 114 humanoid signatures, all reading as baseline human. But the radiation exposure is severe, consistent with prolonged exposure to some kind of radioactive bombardment. And their medical readings, these people are dying. Before Kira could respond, the Yamato's voice returned, and this time it carried the unmistakable weight of barely controlled emotion. Request permission to approach your station. We need to understand what's happened. Our Earth was dying when we left. If what you say is true, then we found something we thought was impossible. Kira's hand hovered over the communications panel. A ship full of dying humans, claiming to be from an Earth that no longer existed, carrying technology that shouldn't function, emerging from a dimensional rift that violated half the laws of physics. Every tactical instinct screamed caution. But the hope in that voice, the desperate need to believe that Earth had somehow survived. Yamato, you have permission to approach. Reduce speed to 1/4 impulse and stand by for docking instructions. And Yamato? Kira's voice softened. Welcome home. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The massive warship began its approach, ancient lines cutting through space with impossible grace, its crew unaware that they were about to discover the most devastating truth of all: their mission to save Earth had already succeeded in another universe entirely. Captain Benjamin Sisko arrived in operation 17 minutes after the initial contact, still fastening his uniform jacket. Behind him came Dr. Julian Bashir, medical kit already in hand, and Chief Miles O'Brien, whose engineers I was already scanning the technical readouts of the approaching vessel with naked fascination. Report, Sisko said, moving to the command center with the controlled urgency that defined his command style. Sir, we have a situation that defies easy categorization. Kira gestured to the view screen where the Yamato was now fully visible, its hull details rendered in sharp relief against the stars. That ship is broadcasting Earth Defense Forces identification codes from the mid-21st century, but the vessel itself is based on a World War II design that should be at the bottom of Earth's ocean. Its crew believes they're on a mission to save Earth from something called the Gamilas Empire, an enemy we have no record of. And they didn't know Earth survived? Sisko asked. No, sir. When I told them, the response was, Kira paused, searching for the right word. Profound. Sisko studied the ship, his eyes tracing the retrofitted hull, the massive engine assemblies that pulsed with unidentifiable energy. Chief, what are we looking at? O'Brien shook his head slowly, the gesture of a man confronting something that challenged everything he knew. Sir, that propulsion system isn't warp drive. It's not Romulan singularity drive. It's not anything I've ever seen. The energy output is comparable to a Galaxy-class starship, but the emission spectrum is completely wrong. And that's before we get to the weapon. Weapon? Forward-mounted, sir. Built into the bow superstructure. The power consumption readings suggest it's capable of channeling their entire engine output into a single directed energy blast. O'Brien looked up from his console. Captain, if those readings are accurate, that weapon could crack a planet. The operations center fell silent. Such weapons existed in theory. The Federation had encountered them in ancient civilizations, in pre-warp cultures that had destroyed themselves, in the arsenals of species that had learned too late that some power was too terrible to wield. But to find one mounted on a ship crewed by humans, broadcasting Earth identification codes. Dr. Bashir, Sisko said, his voice carefully neutral, you mentioned radiation exposure. Severe, Captain. Bashir pulled up the medical scans. The entire crew is suffering from radiation poisoning consistent with prolonged exposure to high-energy bombardment. Without treatment, I'd estimate most of them have weeks, perhaps months. Some are more advanced, they may have days. He looked up. They're not invaders, sir. They're refugees. Dying ones. Sisko turned back to the view screen. The Yamato was closer now, and he could make out details that hadn't been visible before, scorching along the hull that spoke of recent combat, repair patches that looked hasty and desperate, and something else, Japanese characters painted along the bow in stark white. Space Battleship Yamato. They named it after the original, Sisko said quietly. The battleship that was supposed to save Japan in their final desperate hours of World War II. It sank with most of its crew. History repeating, Kira said. Or trying to. Incoming transmission, Tenmei announced. Audio and visual this time. On screen. The view screen shifted from the exterior of the Yamato to its bridge, and Sisko found himself looking at something pulled from both history and impossibility. The command center was cramped, utilitarian, filled with analog controls and cathode displays that belonged in a museum. But the crew moved with practiced efficiency, and the man who appeared at the center of the screen commanded immediate respect despite his obvious physical decline. Captain Okita was perhaps 60, though radiation sickness made age difficult to determine. His face was gaunt, skin pale, but his eyes burned with the intensity of a man who had led his crew through hell and refused to surrender. Behind him, younger officers moved between stations, a tactical officer with fierce determination in his expression, a navigator whose hands never left her controls, an engineer whose uniform bore burn marks from recent damage control. I am Captain Juzo Okita of the Earth Defense Forces Battleship Yamato. His voice carried the weight of formal military protocol, but underneath it ran currents of exhaustion and desperate hope. I must apologize for any alarm our arrival has caused. We were engaged in a desperate warp to Iscandar when our wave motion engine encountered an anomaly. When we emerged, our navigation systems were completely disoriented, and your station appeared on our sensors. Captain Okita, I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko, commanding officer of Deep Space Nine. You're in Bajoran space, approximately 47 light-years from Earth. You mentioned Iscandar, I'm unfamiliar with that designation. Iscandar is located 148,000 light-years from Earth, Okita said. In the large Magellanic Cloud. Queen Starshaw promised us the technology to cleanse our planet of the radioactive contamination that is killing all life on Earth. He paused, and something in his expression cracked slightly. Captain Sisko, your officer told us that Earth survived. That it thrives. We left Sol System 1 year ago by our calendar. When we departed, the planet's surface was completely irradiated by Gamilas planet bombs. The remaining population had retreated to underground cities, and we had perhaps 1 more year before the radiation penetrated deep enough to kill everyone. Is it possible that in the time we've been traveling, Earth recovered? Sisko felt the weight of what he had to say settle on his shoulders. Behind Okita, he could see the Yamato's crew leaning in, desperate to hear the answer. These were people who had volunteered for a suicide mission, who had watched their world die, who had traveled across the galaxy with radiation slowly killing them, sustained only by the hope that they could return in time to save their homeworld. How do you tell someone that their Earth never survived? That they were fighting for a world that existed only in their timeline, their universe? That every sacrifice, every loss, every desperate light-year traveled had been for an Earth that, in this reality, never needed saving? Captain Okita, Sisko said carefully, I think we need to have a longer conversation. One that requires more than a view screen. Will you and your senior officers transport over to Deep Space Nine? We have medical facilities that can treat your radiation exposure, and we have information you need to hear. Okita studied him for a long moment, and Sisko saw the recognition in those eyes, the understanding that whatever Sisko had to tell him would not be simple, would not be easy, but would be true. Transport? Okita asked. Is that similar to matter transmission? Precisely that, Sisko confirmed. Then we accept your invitation, Captain. But understand, my crew has fought too long and sacrificed too much to abandon our mission without understanding what we've found. Okita's voice hardened slightly. And if this is some Gamilas deception, some new weapon to break our spirits, know that the Yamato still has its teeth. No deception, Captain. Just truth. And I suspect that truth will be harder than any weapon. Commander, Okita said to someone off-screen, you have the bridge. Kodai, Shima, Dr. Sato, you're with me. The transmission ended. Transporter Room 3, Sisko said. Chief, I want you there to observe their arrival. Dr. Bashir, prepare for immediate medical scanning and treatment. Major, have security standing by, but keep them discreet. These people are desperate and armed, but they're not our enemies. Understood, Kira said. But sir, about that weapon. I know, Major. We'll deal with the wave motion gun soon enough. First, let's deal with the fact that we're about to tell these people that the Earth they're dying to save doesn't exist in our universe. How do you tell someone that? O'Brien asked quietly. Sisko looked at the Yamato on the screen, at the battle-scarred hull that carried the dreams of a dying Earth. Very carefully, Chief. Very carefully. Transporter Room 3 materialized 4 figures in columns of shimmering light, and the first thing Dr. Bashir noticed was how wrong they looked. Not alien, heartbreakingly human, but wrong in the way that spoke of bodies pushed past their limits and kept moving through sheer force of will. Captain Okita stood straight despite the tremor in his hands that betrayed severe neurological damage from radiation exposure. Beside him, a younger man, perhaps 30, wore the insignia of a tactical officer and carried himself with the coiled readiness of someone who had spent too long in combat. The navigator was a woman in her mid-20s, her face bearing the determination of someone who had plotted courses through hell and refused to lose her way. And the fourth figure was older, a doctor by the medical kit he carried, whose eyes held the exhausted grief of a physician who had watched too many patients die. Welcome aboard Deep Space Nine, Sisko said, stepping forward with his hand extended in the ancient human gesture. I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko. Okita accepted the handshake with the formality of old military tradition. Captain. This is Commander Susumu Kodai, my tactical officer. Lieutenant Yuki Mori, our chief navigator. And Dr. Sekizo Sato, our chief medical officer. This is Dr. Julian Bashir, our chief medical officer, and Chief Miles O'Brien, our chief of operations. Bashir watched Okita's hand shake through the greeting, saw the way Dr. Sato's breath came shallow and labored, noted how Lieutenant Mori kept one hand against the transporter pad for balance. They were dying. All of them. And they knew it. Captain Okita, Bashir said gently, with your permission, I'd like to begin treatment immediately. The radiation exposure you and your crew have suffered is the price of our mission, Okita interrupted, not unkindly. We knew the cost when we volunteered. Every member of the Yamato's crew understood that we would likely not survive the journey. But if we could return to Earth with the Cosmo Cleaner D from Iscandar, our deaths would save billions. He met Bashir's eyes. However, your Captain Sisko suggested that our understanding of the situation may be incomplete. Before we discuss medical treatment, I need to understand what's happened. Sisko gestured toward the door. Conference Room 2. And Dr. Sato, Dr. Bashir can explain our medical capabilities on the way. I think you'll find our technology somewhat more advanced than what you're accustomed to. They moved through the corridors of Deep Space Nine, and Sisko watched the Yamato officers' reactions. Commander Kodai's hand kept drifting to where a weapon would be holstered, his tactical instincts evaluating every junction and bulkhead. Lieutenant Mori's eyes tracked the Cardassian architecture with the navigator's instinct to map every route. Dr. Sato was listening to Bashir's explanation of cellular regeneration with the skepticism of a man who had seen too many miracle cures fail. But it was Okita who stopped suddenly at an observation port overlooking the promenade. Captain Sisko, he said quietly, those people down there. The ones with the ridged foreheads. Are they Gamilas? Sisko followed his gaze to where several Klingon were conducting business with Ferengi merchants, their voices carrying up from below in heated negotiation. Those are Klingon, Sisko said. They're members of the Klingon Empire, one of the major powers in this quadrant. They've been allies of the Federation for nearly 30 years, though our relationship has been complicated at times. Aliens, Kodai said, and there was wonder in his voice beneath the suspicion. We've encountered the Gamilas, and rumors of other species in deep space. But to see them here, trading peacefully with humans. The Federation is composed of over 150 member worlds, O'Brien explained. Humans, Vulcans, Andorians, Tellarites, Balians, Betazoids, thousands of species working together. Impossible, Dr. Sato muttered. The Gamilas sought only our extermination. They bombarded Earth with radioactive planet bombs until the surface became uninhabitable. When we left, the seas were boiling away, the forests were ash, and everyone we loved was huddled in underground cities waiting to die. You're telling us that in your universe, Earth made peace with alien species? Built alliances? Not my universe, Sisko said carefully. Our universe. And that's what we need to discuss. The conference room was quiet, its windows overlooking the Denorios belt where the Yamato hung in space like a relic of desperate times. Sisko dimmed the light slightly, harsh illumination seemed wrong for what he had to say, and gestured for the Yamato officers to sit. Captain Okita, Sisko began, I need you to tell me about Earth. The Earth you left. What year was it by your calendar? 2199, Okita said. September 2199. The Gamilas Empire had been bombarding our planet for 5 years. The United Nations Space Force, later reorganized as the Earth Defense Forces, fought them to a standstill in space, but we couldn't stop the planet bombs. By the time we departed on the Yamato, Earth had less than a year of survivable atmosphere remaining. Sisko nodded slowly. And you received a message from Iscandar. Queen Starsha promised you technology that could cleanse the radiation. Yes. The wave motion engine design came with her message. It was the only way we could build a ship capable of faster-than-light travel. We reconstructed the Yamato from the wreck that had lain on the ocean floor for 254 years, installed the wave motion engine, and departed on a 1-year voyage. Okita's voice carried the weight of impossible distances traveled. We've been fighting our way across the galaxy ever since. The Gamilas don't want us to reach Iscandar. They've sent fleets to stop us. Captain, Sisko said gently, in our timeline, Earth was never attacked by the Gamilas. There was no radioactive bombardment, no underground cities, no desperate voyage to Iscandar. In 2199 by your calendar, which would be approximately 2173 by ours, Earth was already a founding member of the United Federation of Planets. We'd been exploring space peacefully for decades. The silence that followed was absolute. Lieutenant Mori spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper, that's not possible. We left Earth. We saw the devastation. Our families are dying in those underground cities right now. In your universe, yes, O'Brien said quietly. But you came through a dimensional rift. The readings were unmistakable, chronoton particles, tachyon emissions, subspace ruptures consistent with transdimensional transit. You didn't just travel through space, Captain. You crossed from your universe into ours. Kodai stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the deck. You're saying our Earth is still dying? That everyone we left behind exists in a parallel reality, Bashir finished. I'm sorry, Commander. But in this universe, the Earth you're trying to save never needed saving. Dr. Sato laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Then we failed. We traveled 148,000 light-years, watched our crewmates die from radiation and Gamilas attacks, pushed ourselves beyond every limit, and we failed because we ended up in the wrong universe. Not necessarily, Sisko said. Our scientists have studied transdimensional phenomena extensively. If we can understand how you arrived here, we may be able to send you back. Your mission isn't over, Captain Okita. It's just become more complicated. Okita sat motionless, his hands flat on the conference table, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he looked up at Sisko. Show me, he said. Show me Earth. This Earth. The one that survived. Sisko activated the view screen. Earth appeared, blue and green and achingly beautiful, its cities glittering across the night side, its oceans reflecting the sun, its atmosphere clean and life-giving. Starships moved in orbit, space stations hung in geosynchronous positions, and the moon bore the lights of humanity's oldest off-world colonies. Lieutenant Mori made a sound like a sob. That's what we're fighting for, she whispered. That's what Earth was supposed to look like. What it will look like if we succeed. If you can return to your universe, Sisko said. But Captain Okita, I need to be honest with you. The technology you're carrying, specifically the wave motion gun, is unlike anything in our database. The power output alone suggests a weapon capable of planetary destruction. In this universe, such weapons are banned by treaty. Their very existence is considered a threat to all sentient life. In our universe, Kodai said, his voice hard, that weapon is the only thing that's kept us alive. We've used it 3 times against Gamilas fleets that would have destroyed us. It's a weapon of last resort, but it saved our lives and kept our mission alive. I understand, Sisko said. And I'm not asking you to surrender it. But you need to understand the situation you've entered. We're in the middle of a war, the Dominion War. An enemy from the Gamma Quadrant called the Dominion is trying to conquer the Alpha Quadrant. They've already taken dozens of worlds. And when word spreads that a ship carrying a planet-killing weapon has appeared in Bajoran space, everyone will want it, Okita finished. Either to use it, or to ensure no one else can. Exactly. Okita looked at his officers, and some silent communication passed between them, the understanding of a crew that had fought together through impossible odds, that trusted each other with their lives, that carried the weight of a dying world on their shoulders. Captain Sisko, Okita said, we need time. Time to understand what's happened, time to repair our ship, time to determine if returning to our universe is even possible. Can you give us that time? I can, Sisko said. But I need your word that the wave motion gun remains offline while you're in Federation space. And I need your cooperation in helping us understand your technology. You have my word, Okita said. The wave motion gun will not be fired unless the Yamato faces immediate destruction. He paused. But Captain, understand this, we will return to our universe. We will complete our mission. And if anyone, Federation, Dominion, or anyone else, tries to stop us, the Yamato will defend itself. Sisko met his eyes and saw the unshakable resolve of a man who had led his crew through hell and would not stop until they reached salvation or death. Understood, Captain. Welcome to Deep Space Nine. Let's see if we can get you home. The medical bay of Deep Space Nine had seen its share of unusual patients, Jem'Hadar suffering withdrawal from Ketracel White, founders wounded in their liquid state, casualties from a dozen species with biochemistries that defied standard treatment protocols. But watching Dr. Bashir work on the Yamato crew was different. These were humans. Baseline humans who should have responded to cellular regeneration like anyone from Earth, yet their bodies bore damage so profound that Bashir's instruments struggled to find healthy tissue to use as a template. The radiation exposure isn't just acute, Bashir explained to Dr. Sato as they stood over Lieutenant Mori's biobed. It's cumulative and multispectrum. You've been exposed to at least 7 different radioactive isotopes simultaneously, some of which I can't even identify. Your cellular regeneration has been compromised at the genetic level. Dr. Sato watched the diagnostic displays with the hungry attention of a physician seeing miracles rendered routine. In our medical facilities, we can treat standard radiation poisoning with chelation therapy and blood transfusions. But what our crew has endured, he shook his head. I've lost 47 crew members since we left Earth. Another 30 are in critical condition. I've done everything I can with the equipment we have, but it's not enough. It will be here, Bashir said with quiet confidence. Cellular regeneration can repair the DNA damage and flush the radioactive isotopes from their systems. It will take time, possibly weeks for the worst cases, but they will recover. All of them? Dr. Sato's voice cracked slightly. All of them who allow treatment, yes. Dr. Sato turned away, and Bashir saw his shoulders shake once before the older physician regained control. When he turned back, his eyes were wet but his voice was steady. Dr. Bashir, I need to ask you something. If your technology can cure radiation poisoning this severe, could it cure an entire planet? Bashir hesitated. He knew where this was going. In theory, yes. But the scale would be astronomical. Earth has billions of square kilometers of surface area, trillions of tons of contaminated soil and water. Even with Federation resources, decontaminating an entire planet would take years, possibly decades. But possible? Possible, yes. Dr. Sato nodded slowly. Then perhaps our mission hasn't failed. Perhaps we've simply found a different answer than the one we were searching for. In the wardroom adjacent to operations, Chief O'Brien had spread out every technical schematic the Yamato crew had been willing to share. Commander Kodai stood on the opposite side of the table, his arms crossed, watching O'Brien's reaction with barely concealed defensive pride. This is insane, O'Brien said for the third time, his eyes scanning the wave motion engine schematics. The tachyon generation matrix alone should create a feedback loop that would tear the ship apart. And somehow you're channeling the entire output through a magnetic compression chamber and firing it as a coherent beam? The wave motion gun, Kodai said. And yes, it works. I've fired it myself. When the Yamato faces an enemy fleet that would otherwise destroy us, we charge the gun, and we eliminate the threat. By destroying everything in a cone-shaped area of effect extending thousands of kilometers, O'Brien said flatly. Commander, this isn't a weapon. It's a doomsday device. It's salvation, Kodai countered, his voice hard. When Gamilas dreadnoughts surround you with no escape, when your shields are failing and your crew is dying, when the fate of your entire species depends on breaking through enemy lines, that's when you understand what the wave motion gun truly is. It's the difference between completing our mission and dying in deep space while Earth suffocates. O'Brien looked up from the schematics, meeting Kodai's eyes. I've been in combat, Commander. I fought in the Cardassian War, I've faced the Borg, and I'm fighting in this war against the Dominion. I understand desperate situations. But this weapon, he gestured at the schematics. It's too much power. What happens when someone uses it not out of desperation but out of convenience? What happens when it becomes the first option instead of the last? We have protocols, Kodai said. The wave motion gun requires the captain's authorization, the tactical officer's firing solution, and a minimum 30-second charging sequence. It's not fired casually. But it can be fired. And in a universe at war, that makes it valuable to people who might not share your restraint. Kodai's hand moved to where his weapon would be holstered, then stopped. The gesture was unconscious, defensive, and it told O'Brien everything he needed to know about how the Yamato crew viewed their ship's greatest weapon, as both salvation and burden, power and curse. Chief O'Brien, Kodai said carefully, I understand your concern. But try to understand ours. Every member of the Yamato's crew volunteered knowing we would probably die. We've traveled through Gamilas-controlled space, fought battles against impossible odds, and watched our friends die from radiation poisoning because we have to believe, that what we're doing matters. That weapon is why we're still alive to complete our mission. Don't ask us to give up the one thing that's kept us from becoming another memorial floating in deep space. Before O'Brien could respond, Nog's voice came through the comm system, Chief, you need to see this. We're getting unusual sensor readings from Cardassian space. In operations, the main view screen displayed a long-range scan of the sector. 3 Cardassian warships were adjusting course, their trajectories converging on Deep Space Nine's position. "They're not making any aggressive moves," Kira reported, "but they're definitely interested in something. I'm picking up intensive sensor sweeps focused on the Yamato." "Of course they are," Sisko said grimly. A previously unknown Earth vessel appears near Bajoran space carrying technology that doesn't match any known configuration. The Cardassians would be foolish not to investigate. "Captain," Nog said, "I'm also detecting subspace communications between the Cardassian ships and what appears to be an Obsidian order frequency. They're transmitting compressed data packets, probably our sensor readings of the Yamato." Sisko's jaw tightened. The Obsidian order, Cardassia's intelligence service, operated with ruthless efficiency. If they believed the Yamato represented a tactical advantage, they would move to acquire it regardless of Federation objections. "Hail the lead Cardassian vessel." The view screen shifted to show Gul Evek, a name and face Sisko knew too well from border disputes and diplomatic incidents. The Cardassian's facial ridges seemed more pronounced than usual, his expression carrying the calculating intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "Captain Sisko," Evek said with false cordiality. "We detected an unusual energy signature near your station and wanted to ensure there was no threat to regional stability. That vessel near DS9, we have no record of its configuration or capabilities. The ship is under Federation protection," Sisko said flatly. "It poses no threat to Cardassian interests." "Ah, but you see, Captain, that's where we disagree. Our sensors detected an energy discharge during its arrival that exceeded anything in our database. A ship with that kind of power, appearing in a contested region during wartime," Evek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You understand our concern." "Your concern is noted, Gul Evek. The vessel will remain in Federation space under our authority." "Of course, Captain. We're simply observing. For now." The screen went dark. "He's going to move on it," Kira said immediately. "The Obsidian Order doesn't observe, they act." "I know," Sisko said. "Get Captain Okita up here. He needs to understand that his ship just became the most valuable target in the sector." When Okita arrived in operations 10 minutes later, he looked marginally better. Bashir's treatments were already taking effect, but the weight on his shoulders seemed heavier. He listened as Sisko explained the Cardassian interest, the strategic implications, the danger. "So we've gone from fighting the Gamilas to being hunted by the Cardassians," Okita said. "The galaxy seems remarkably consistent regardless of which universe we're in." "The Cardassians aren't your only concern," Sisko said. He activated a display showing the current territorial map of the Alpha Quadrant. "This is the strategic situation. The Dominion, an empire from the Gamma Quadrant, is waging war against the Federation and our allies. They've conquered dozens of worlds and they're pushing deeper into our territory every day. When they learn about the Yamato and the wave motion gun, they'll want to either control it or destroy it," Okita finished. "We've seen this pattern before. The Gamilas Empire operated the same way, anything they couldn't control became a target for elimination." "There's something else you should know," Sisko said reluctantly. "The Federation has unofficial elements. Groups that operate outside normal authority to protect Federation interests through methods that wouldn't be approved through official channels. They're called Section 31, and when they learn about your weapon, they'll see it as an asset to be acquired for the war effort. Even if we refuse. Especially if you refuse." Okita moved to the window, looking out at where the Yamato hung in space, scarred, powerful, carrying the hopes of a dying Earth that existed in another universe. When he spoke, his voice carried the exhaustion of a man who had fought too long against too many enemies. "Captain Sisko, I'm beginning to understand why you seemed so concerned about our arrival. We came here by accident, seeking only to return to our universe and complete our mission. Instead, we've become a strategic asset in a war that isn't ours, hunted by factions that see us as either a weapon to be claimed or a threat to be eliminated. That's an accurate assessment, Sisko said. Then what do you suggest? Sisko looked at the Yamato, thinking about the desperate mission it carried, the crew that refused to surrender, the weapon that could save or damn them depending on who controlled it. He thought about the Dominion War, about the ships being lost every day, about the worlds falling to Jem'Hadar occupation. He thought about the moral line between defending civilization and becoming the thing you were fighting against. I suggest, Sisko said slowly, that we find a way to send you home before anyone decides that keeping you here serves their interests more than letting you go. And if we can't return? Then we find out what kind of captain you are when your mission becomes impossible but your crew still needs you to lead them. Okita met his eyes, and Sisko saw recognition there, the understanding between commanders who had both faced situations where every choice led to loss, where duty and conscience pulled in opposite directions, where leadership meant carrying burdens that no one else could bear. I've already answered that question, Captain Sisko. I lead them forward. Always forward. Until we succeed or until we can't take another step. Then we're going to get along just fine, Captain Okita. Because that's the only way anyone survives out here. The transmission reached Deep Space Nine at 0820 hours, originating from a Jem'Hadar attack ship that had dropped out of warp at the edge of sensor range. No threat posture, no weapons lock, just a simple hail requesting communication with Captain Sisko. That alone was unusual enough to put the entire station on alert. On screen, Sisko ordered, his hand hovering near the tactical console. The view screen resolved into the image of Avorta, the Dominion's cloned administrators who served as the diplomatic face of the Founder's will. This one was female, her appearance pleasant and unthreatening in the way that Vorta always managed, as though their genetic engineering had optimized for disarming their opponents before negotiations even began. Captain Sisko, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I am Eris, representative of the Dominion. I apologize for the unannounced arrival, but we've detected the presence of an unusual vessel in your custody, and the Founders wish to extend an offer of assistance. The Founders can keep their assistance, Sisko said flatly. We don't need it. Of course not. The Federation is quite capable of managing its own affairs. Eris's smile never wavered. However, we understand that this vessel, the Yamato, I believe it's called, comes from an alternate reality. That its crew is suffering from radiation exposure. That it carries technology unlike anything in this quadrant. The Founders are curious about such anomalies, Captain. We're offering medical aid, technical expertise, and safe passage should the Yamato's crew wish to travel deeper into Federation space for protection. And in exchange, simply the opportunity to study the dimensional rift that brought them here. The Founders are always interested in expanding their understanding of the universe. Such knowledge benefits everyone, don't you agree? Sisko's hand moved away from the tactical console, but only because he needed both hands to keep himself from showing the anger he felt. The Dominion's offer was transparent: gain access to the Yamato, study the wave motion technology, and either replicate it for their own use or ensure the Federation never gained that advantage. Thank you for the offer, Eris. We'll decline. That's unfortunate. The pleasantness in her voice didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. The Founders will be disappointed. They do so hope that the Federation understands the value of cooperation during these difficult times. It would be a shame if the Yamato's presence became a source of regional instability. Is that a threat? Merely an observation, Captain. The Alpha Quadrant is crowded with ambitious powers. The Cardassians are already showing interest. The Romulans will undoubtedly learn of this soon. The Klingon, despite their alliance with you, are a warrior culture who respect strength above all else. And then there are elements within your own Federation who might see the Yamato as a necessary evil in desperate times. Eris tilted her head slightly. So many potential complications. The Founders simply wish to help you avoid them. The transmission ended before Sisko could respond. She's right, Kira said quietly. About all of it. The moment word spreads about that ship, Every major power in the quadrant is going to move on it. I know, Sisko said. Which means we have very little time before this situation spirals out of our control. In the Yamato's medical bay, Lieutenant Yuki Mori sat on a bio bed while Bashir monitored her cellular regeneration progress. The treatment was working, her radiation levels had dropped 40% in just 6 hours, but her expression carried something that medical technology couldn't treat. You're thinking about home, Bashir said gently. I'm thinking about my brother, Mori said. He was in the Tokyo underground when we left. Sector 7, Level 3. He sent me a message the day before we departed. Told me he was proud of me. That he understood why I had to go. She looked down at her hands. He also told me he didn't think he'd survive long enough for us to return. The radiation was already starting to penetrate to Level 3. The air filters were failing. I'm sorry. Dr. Bashir, you said your Federation could potentially decontaminate an entire planet. How long would it take? Bashir pulled up a computational model he'd been working on. For a planet as contaminated as you've described? With current Federation resources fully committed to the war effort? 15 to 20 years. If we redirected a significant portion of our scientific and engineering core, possibly as little as 8 to 10 years. 8 years, Mori repeated. My brother will be dead in 8 months. Everyone in Tokyo will be dead. Most of the underground cities will be uninhabitable within a year. If you can return to your universe, Bashir said carefully, and if you can reach Iscandar and obtain this Cosmo Cleaner D technology, how quickly could it cleanse Earth? Queen Starsha said it would take 1 year once deployed. 1 year to restore Earth to what it was before the Gamilas attacked. Then that's still your best hope. Mori looked up at him, and Bashir saw the calculation in her eyes, the navigator's mind that had plotted impossible courses through enemy territory, that had calculated vectors and fuel consumption and time to destination through every obstacle the galaxy could throw at them. What if we don't go back? She asked. What if we stayed here, in this universe, and asked the Federation to help us reach Iscandar from this side? The large Magellanic Cloud exists in every universe, doesn't it? Queen Starsha's planet should still be there. Bashir felt something cold settle in his chest. You'd abandon your Earth? Your families? My family is already dead, Doctor. I know that. I've known it since we were 2 months into the voyage and the radiation sickness started manifesting. We're all dying, even with your treatments, even with our determination, we've been exposed to too much for too long. Her voice remained steady despite the tears on her cheeks. But the Cosmo Cleaner D technology doesn't have to die with us. If we obtained it here, brought it back to the Federation, it could save worlds that are being ravaged by Dominion weapons. It could have value beyond just our Earth. That's not your decision to make, Bashir said. Captain Okita. Captain Okita is dying faster than the rest of us. The command burden, the stress, the fact that he was already sick when we departed Earth, he has weeks, Doctor. Maybe days if his condition deteriorates. And when he's gone, Commander Kodai will take command. Kodai who fired the wave motion gun at Gamilas fleets without hesitation. Kodai who sees every problem as something to be overcome through force if necessary. Mori stood, her hands gripping the edge of the bio-bed. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand, the Yamato's crew is fracturing. Some of us still believe we can complete the original mission. Others are starting to think we should stay here, offer our services to the Federation in exchange for protection and resources. And others, she hesitated. Others what? Others think the wave motion gun makes us valuable enough that we don't need anyone's permission. That we could take what we need and go wherever we want because no one in this universe can stop us. Before Bashir could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. In operations, the sensor display showed 3 new contacts dropping out of warp. Not Jem'Hadar attack ships this time. These vessels were sleeker, more predatory, bearing the distinctive design philosophy of a species that valued stealth and strategic superiority above all else. Romulan warbuds, Kira said, her voice tight. 3 Derrida class. They're not decloaking, they want us to know they're here. Hail them, Sisko ordered. The view screen showed Commander Torith, a Romulan officer Sisko had encountered before during border incidents. She was sharp-minded, ruthlessly efficient, and entirely committed to Romulan supremacy. If she was here personally, the Tal Shir had taken a direct interest in the Yamato. Captain Sisko, Torith said without preamble. The Romulan Star Empire has detected the presence of an unknown vessel carrying what appears to be a planet-destroying weapon. As this represents a potential threat to regional stability, we are formally requesting that the vessel be turned over to Romulan custody for analysis and containment. Request denied. That's unfortunate. The Senate views this weapon as a violation of the Treaty of Algeran's spirit, if not its letter. A ship from an alternate universe carrying such destructive capability cannot be allowed to remain unregulated. The Yamato is under Federation protection. For now, Torith said. But consider your position, Captain. The Dominion wants this ship. The Cardassians are circling. And now the Romulan Star Empire has expressed its concerns. How long can you protect them against everyone? The transmission ended. We're being boxed in, O'Brien said. Dominion to our rear, Cardassians to the south, Romulans to the east. If they coordinate. They won't, Sisko said. Not yet. They all want the Yamato for themselves, and none of them trust the others enough to share. But Major Kira is right, we're running out of time before someone decides taking the ship by force is easier than negotiating. Captain, Nog said urgently, I'm detecting another warp signature. Big one. It's broadcasting Klingon identification codes. The view screen showed a Klingon Vorcha-class attack cruiser dropping out of warp with the aggressive posture that defined Klingon military philosophy. But this ship bore the insignia of the House of Martok, one of the Federation's most reliable Klingon allies during the war. Captain Sisko. General Martok's voice boomed through operations before the visual connection was even established. When his face appeared, weathered, one-eyed, bearing the scars of countless battles, he was grinning. I hear you've acquired something that has the entire quadrant in an uproar. A warship from another universe with a weapon powerful enough to destroy planets. This I had to see for myself. General Martok, Sisko said, relief evident in his voice. I wasn't expecting Klingon reinforcement. Reinforcement? Ha! I came because I wanted to meet these warriors who traveled across their galaxy while dying from radiation poisoning, fighting enemies at every turn, refusing to surrender despite impossible odds. These are my kind of people, Sisko. And if the Romulans and Cardassians think they can take this prize without going through me first, they'll learn what it means to face a true warrior. Sisko allowed himself a small smile. Leave it to Martok to see the Yamato not as a strategic asset but as proof that honor and courage still existed in the universe. General, I could use your help keeping the other powers at bay while we figure out how to return the Yamato to its own universe. Return them? Why would you do that? With a weapon like theirs, we could break the Dominion's advance. Martok's expression turned serious. But I understand. They fight for their own people, not for ours. Honor demands we help them complete their mission rather than steal it for ourselves. He paused. Though I would very much like to meet their captain. Any warrior who commands such loyalty from a dying crew has earned a conversation over blood wine. I'll arrange it, Sisko said. But General, we have a problem. The Dominion, the Cardassians, and the Romulans are all positioning to take the Yamato. If this turns into a multi-faction conflict, then it will be glorious, Martok interrupted. And short. My ship alone can hold this position until reinforcements arrive. Let them come, Sisko. Let them learn that some prizes are defended by warriors who don't fear death. The transmission ended, and Sisko turned to find Captain Okita standing at the entrance to operations, having heard the entire exchange. Your General Martok reminds me of Commander Kodai, Okita said. He sees battle as the answer to every question. Martok has earned the right to that confidence, Sisko said. He's one of the finest warriors in the Klingon Empire. If he says he'll hold this position, he will. Captain Sisko, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But I can see the situation as clearly as you can. The Yamato has become a liability to your station. If we departed now, drew these factions away from Deep Space Nine, you'd be destroyed within hours, Sisko interrupted. Your ship is damaged, your crew is being treated for radiation poisoning, and you're facing enemies who know exactly where you are and what you're carrying. You wouldn't make it past the first Romulan patrol. Then what do you suggest? Sisko looked out at the tactical display, at the forces converging on his station, at the Yamato hanging in space like bait in a trap that was closing from every direction. I suggest, he said slowly, that we stop trying to hide what you are and start using it. Every faction out there wants your weapon. Let's make them understand exactly why that's a mistake. The conference room had become more crowded. Captain Okita sat at one end of the table with Commander Kodai and Lieutenant Mori flanking him. Sisko occupied the opposite end with Kira and O'Brien. General Martok had insisted on attending, his bulk filling a chair that seemed barely adequate for a Klingon warrior of his stature. And standing in the corner, having arrived unannounced on a civilian transport, was a man Sisko knew only by reputation and the cold efficiency with which he operated. I don't believe we've been formally introduced, the man said with a pleasant smile that held no warmth. My name is Sloan. I represent certain Federation interests that operate outside normal channels. Section 31, Sisko said flatly. A dramatic name for a pragmatic organization, Captain. We do what's necessary to protect the Federation when official methods prove insufficient. Sloan turned his attention to Okita. Captain, I've reviewed the technical specifications your crew shared with Chief O'Brien. The wave motion engine is remarkable, a propulsion system that doesn't rely on dilithium, doesn't create conventional warp fields, yet achieves faster-than-light velocities through tachyon manipulation. And the wave motion gun, he paused appreciatively. A weapon that can destroy an entire fleet with a single shot. Do you understand what that represents in our current war? I understand exactly what it represents, Okita said, his voice cold. It represents the difference between survival and extinction when you face an enemy that outnumbers you and wants nothing less than your complete annihilation. We've lived that reality, Mr. Sloan. We don't need lectures about the weapon's value. Then you understand why keeping such a weapon out of Dominion hands should be your priority. Our priority, Kodai interrupted, is returning to our universe and completing our mission. Not fighting your war. Your war, Commander. Sloan's pleasant expression never changed. The Dominion doesn't limit itself to one universe. If they learned transdimensional travel existed, how long do you think it would take before they invaded your reality? Before Jem'Hadar's soldiers were bombing your underground cities while the Founders reshaped your Earth to suit their purposes? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Are you threatening us? Kodai's hand moved toward his sidearm. I'm stating facts, Sloan said. The dimensional rift that brought you here is still detectable. Our scientists are studying it even now. If we can understand how you crossed between universes, so can the Dominion. And they will, Commander. The moment they obtain access to your universe, your dying Earth becomes another conquest for the Founders' collection. Enough. Sisko's voice cut through the tension. Sloan, get to your point or get off my station. My point, Captain, is simple. Section 31 is prepared to offer the Yamato's crew everything they need, full medical treatment, repairs to their vessel, safe passage to Iscandar in this universe to obtain the Cosmo Cleaner D technology, and assistance in returning to their home universe with the means to save their Earth. Sloan looked directly at Okita. All we ask in exchange is temporary access to your wave motion technology. Not the weapon itself, just the principles behind it. Let our scientists study it, understand it, potentially develop countermeasures should the Dominion somehow acquire similar capabilities. And if we refuse? Okita asked. Then you remain trapped between competing factions, hunted by everyone, protected by no one. Section 31 works outside official channels, Captain. We can make you disappear from every sensor grid in the quadrant. We can falsify records, create false trails, ensure that every faction chasing you finds nothing but dead ends. But we need your cooperation. Martok stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the deck. This is dishonorable. You would blackmail warriors who fight for their people's survival. I would ensure the Federation's survival by any means necessary, Sloane said calmly. That's what I was created to do. And before you judge me too harshly, General, consider this. If the Romulans obtain the wave motion gun first, how many Federation worlds burn? If the Cardassians reverse engineer the technology, how many Bajoran refugees die? If the Dominion adds planet-destroying weapons to their arsenal, how many species face extinction? He turned back to Okita. I'm offering you a path forward that serves both our interests. Reject it, and you're on your own against everyone. Captain Sisko, Okita said quietly, is this man speaking for the Federation? Sisko felt the weight of that question settle on him like a physical force. Section 31 operated in the shadows, doing the things that Starfleet couldn't officially sanction, making the moral compromises that allowed the Federation to maintain its ideals. He despised everything they represented. But he also couldn't deny that sometimes, rarely, reluctantly, their methods achieved results that official channels couldn't. No, Sisko said finally. Sloane speaks only for Section 31. The Federation's official position is that the Yamato is under our protection and any attempt to seize your technology would violate our principles. But unofficially? Kodai pressed. Unofficially, there are elements within the Federation that would agree with Sloane's assessment. That the war justifies extreme measures. That your weapon could save lives even if obtaining it requires moral compromises. Sisko met Okita's eyes. I'm not one of those people, Captain. But I won't lie to you about their existence. Okita sat in silence for a long moment, his hands flat on the table, his breathing shallow from the radiation damage that even Bashir's treatments couldn't fully reverse yet. When he spoke, his voice carried the exhaustion of a man who had spent too long making impossible choices. Mr. Sloane, I appreciate the offer. But the Yamato's crew didn't travel 148,000 light-years just to become weapons merchants. Our mission is to save our Earth, not to arm yours. He paused. However, I'm not naive enough to believe we can complete that mission without help. Captain Sisko, you've offered us protection and assistance in understanding how we arrived here. That's more than any other faction has offered. So I'll make you a counter-proposal. I'm listening, Sisko said. Help us understand the dimensional rift. Help us determine if we can return to our universe. If we can, if there's a genuine path home, then we'll work with your scientists to document the wave motion engine's principles. Not to weaponize them for your war, but to ensure you understand the physics involved. Knowledge freely shared, not coerced. And if you can't return? Sloane asked. Then we find Iscandar in this universe and obtain the Cosmo Cleaner D. And we make a decision about what happens next when we actually have options instead of being hunted by every power in the quadrant. That's not acceptable, Sloane said. The war won't wait for your schedule. Then the war will have to manage without us, Kodai said sharply. We're not your weapon, and we're not your asset. We're people trying to save our world. Sloane's pleasant expression finally cracked, showing the cold calculation beneath. You're making a mistake, Captain Okita. Section 31 protects Federation interests. If you become a threat to those interests. If you threaten the Yamato, Martok interrupted, his voice a low growl, you'll answer to the House of Martok. And I promise you, whatever shadows you hide in won't protect you from a Klingon who's decided you lack honor. General Martok, Sisko said carefully, threatening Section 31 operatives isn't helpful. Neither is letting them terrorize our guests, Martok countered. These warriors deserve better than veiled threats from cowards who won't even show their full faces. Sloane stood, smoothing his civilian attire with deliberate calm. Captain Okita, my offer remains open. When you realize that cooperation serves your interests better than pride, contact me through Captain Sisko. Until then, I hope you survive the attention you've attracted. He left the conference room, and the door hissed shut behind him with a finality that suggested the conversation was far from over. I don't trust him, Mori said quietly. You shouldn't, Kira replied. Section 31 serves the Federation, but they serve their own vision of it. Not the one the rest of us are trying to build. Captain Sisko, Okita said, I need honesty from you. Can you protect us against all of these factions? The Dominion, the Cardassians, the Romulans, and now your own Section 31. Sisko considered lying, considered offering reassurances that would ease the burden on a dying man's shoulders. But Okita deserved truth. No, Sisko said. Not indefinitely. I can hold this position with Martok's help, but eventually someone will make a move that forces a confrontation. Days, maybe a week if we're lucky. After that, he gestured at the tactical display showing the forces converging on Deep Space Nine. After that, we'll be fighting a multi-faction conflict that serves no one's interests. Then we need to move faster, O'Brien said. Captain Okita, with your permission, I'd like to bring my entire engineering team aboard the Yamato. We'll analyze the dimensional rift's residual signature in your engine systems, cross-reference it with our own transdimensional research, and see if we can find a way to recreate the conditions that brought you here. How long would that take? Kodai asked. Unknown. Could be days, could be weeks. Dimensional physics isn't an exact science. Every universe has slightly different underlying constants. Finding a way to bridge between them, O'Brien shook his head. We're essentially trying to open a door when we don't know where the door is, what it's made of, or if it even exists anymore. But it's possible. Okita pressed. Theoretically, yes. Practically. O'Brien met his eyes. Captain, I'll give you everything I have. Every resource, every bit of expertise, every hour I can spare. But I can't promise success. That's all anyone can offer, Okita said. Hope and effort. We'll take both. Martok laughed, a booming sound that seemed to fill the room. Captain Okita, I was right about you. You're a warrior in the truest sense, not because you seek glory in battle, but because you refuse to surrender even when every rational calculation says you should. That's honorable. That's worthy of respect. He stood, his massive frame towering over the table. I'll position my ship between you and any faction that approaches with hostile intent. Let them try to reach you through a Klingon who's decided you're worth defending. General, Okita said, I appreciate the gesture. But if this leads to combat, then it leads to combat. Martok's grin widened. Do you know how long it's been since I faced a proper challenge? The Dominion sends wave after wave of Jem'Hadar, but they're soldiers following orders, not warriors seeking glory. The Cardassians plot and scheme but rarely fight with honor. The Romulans hide behind cloaking devices like PTQ. He clapped Okita on the shoulder hard enough to make the dying captain wince. But defending warriors on a righteous mission while surrounded by enemies? That's a story worthy of song. Try not to enjoy yourself too much, General, Sisko said dryly. We're trying to avoid a war, not start one. Avoiding war is overrated, Sisko. But I'll follow your lead. For now. Martok moved toward the door, then paused. Captain Okita, when your crew has recovered sufficiently, I would be honored to share blood wine with them. We'll drink to fallen comrades and impossible missions. It's the least warriors deserve. When Martok had left, the room felt somehow smaller, the weight of their situation more immediate without the Klingons' aggressive confidence filling the space. Captain Sisko, Okita said, I have one more question. Your Dr. Bashir mentioned that Federation technology could potentially decontaminate my Earth if we couldn't return. He estimated 8 to 10 years with sufficient resources. Is that accurate? If every resource was devoted to it, yes. But Captain, with the war. I understand. The war takes priority. Everything takes priority over a world that doesn't exist in this universe. Okita's voice carried no bitterness, just tired resignation. But if we can't return, if the dimensional rift can't be recreated, then that Federation technology becomes our only hope. Even if it takes decades. Even if everyone we knew is dead by the time it's implemented. The Earth itself would survive. Humanity would survive. You'd stay here? Kira asked. Abandon your universe entirely? I'd do whatever was necessary to ensure my crew's sacrifice wasn't meaningless, Okita said. That's what command means, Major. Making the choices no one else wants to make and living with the consequences. Sisko recognized that burden. He carried a version of it every day, the weight of decisions that saved some lives by sacrificing others, that preserved principles by compromising them, that defended civilization by embracing methods that civilization officially condemned. Command was lonely because ultimately, every captain stood alone with their choices and their ghosts. Chief O'Brien, Sisko said, assemble your engineering team. I want round-the-clock work on understanding that dimensional rift. If there's a way home for the Yamato, we're going to find it. Aye, sir. Major Kira, coordinate with General Martok. I want sensor nets covering every approach to DS9. If any faction makes a move toward the Yamato, I want warning before they're in weapons range. Understood. And Captain Okita, get your crew ready. Because one way or another, we're going to find out if hope and effort are enough. Worf son of Moke stood in the Yamato's cramped corridor, studying the vessel's interior with the critical eye of a warrior who had spent his life evaluating ship designs for tactical advantages and weaknesses. The battleship was a contradiction, ancient in its architecture yet functional in ways that defied its apparent primitiveness. Analog controls sat beside holographic displays. Manual hatches existed where transporters should provide access. And everywhere, the crew moved with the disciplined efficiency of people who had spent too long in combat to waste motion or words. Commander Kodai appeared from a side passage, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from recent damage control operations. He stopped when he saw Worf, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm before recognition set in. Lieutenant Commander Worf, Kodai said, forcing his hand away from the weapon. Captain Sisko said you wanted to inspect our tactical systems. If you will permit it, Worf said. I am Chief Strategic Operations Officer for Deep Space Nine. Understanding your ship's capabilities will help me coordinate our defensive strategy. Defensive strategy, Kodai repeated, a bitter edge to his voice. You mean how to protect us from everyone who wants to steal our technology or destroy us for having it? Yes. The bluntness seemed to surprise Kodai, then earned a grudging nod of respect. At least you're honest. Follow me. I'll show you what we have. They moved through passages that seemed designed for a crew half the Yamato's actual size, past damage control stations where repairs were ongoing, past crew quarters where dying officers rested between shifts because there weren't enough healthy personnel to maintain full rotations. Worf saw the signs of a ship pushed beyond its limits, jury-rigged systems, emergency patches that had become permanent fixtures, were patterns that spoke of constant combat operations without time for proper maintenance. How long have you been in continuous operation? Worf asked. 364 days, Kodai said. We've docked for repairs twice. Once at an asteroid base where we fought off a Gamilas fleet during the maintenance period, once at an automated refueling station that turned out to be a trap. Otherwise, we've been running on emergency power redistribution, cannibalizing non-essential systems for spare parts, and praying the wave motion engine doesn't fail at a critical moment. Your crew must be exceptional to maintain operations under such conditions. Our crew is dying, Kodai said flatly. But we don't have the luxury of giving up. Every day we survive is one day closer to Iscandar. Every battle we win is one less obstacle between us and saving Earth. So we keep fighting. What else can we do? They reached the ship's tactical center, a cramped space dominated by targeting computers that would have looked primitive to any Starfleet officer but clearly functioned with devastating efficiency. Kodai pulled up a holographic display showing the Yamato's weapons systems. Standard armament, shock cannons, missile launchers, torpedo tubes. Nothing remarkable by your standards, I'm sure. Effective against Gamilas vessels but limited against heavily shielded targets. He gestured to a separate display showing power consumption readings that made Worf's eyes widen. And then there's the wave motion gun. I have read Chief O'Brien's analysis, Worf said. The power output is extraordinary. But using such a weapon requires charging time, leaving your ship vulnerable. 30 seconds, Kodai confirmed. During which we have to maintain a stable firing solution, redirect all engine power to the weapon, and pray that nothing hits us hard enough to disrupt the sequence. If we're forced to abort after 20 seconds of charging, the energy discharge could tear the ship apart from the inside. He met Worf's eyes. But when we fire, Commander, when that beam leaves the barrel and hits its target, nothing survives. Not fleets. Not fortifications. Nothing. You have used this weapon in combat 3 times. First at the Battle of Pluto when a Gamilas fleet had us surrounded. Second at the Balan star system when we encountered an enemy fortress that would have destroyed us before we could escape. Third, Kodai's voice faltered slightly. Third at a dimensional rift where Gamilas forces were preparing to invade our solar system through subspace. We collapsed the rift and everything within 10,000 kilometers of it. You killed how many? 7,000 Gamilas soldiers. Maybe more. The sensors couldn't distinguish individual signatures during the dissolution. Kodai turned away from the display. I gave the order, Commander Worf. Captain Okita was unconscious from radiation exposure, and I was the ranking officer. 7,000 lives ended because I decided they were worth less than completing our mission. Worf understood the weight in that confession. He had killed in combat, had made tactical decisions that resulted in enemy deaths, had even been forced to execute someone to preserve Klingon honor. But genocide, even of an enemy, left marks that never fully healed. You believe you committed murder, Worf said. I know I did. And I'd do it again if I had to, because those 7,000 Gamilas were trying to kill everyone on Earth. But that doesn't make it honorable, Commander. It makes it necessary. There's a difference. In Klingon philosophy, there is honor in defending your people by any means necessary. The enemy chose their fate when they attacked. You simply delivered the consequences of their choice. Is that how you sleep at night? Kodai asked, not unkindly. Telling yourself the enemy chose their own death. No, Worf admitted. I sleep by accepting that some choices have no honor, only necessity. That command requires bearing the weight of decisions that cannot be justified, only endured. That warriors who claim to never compromise their principles have simply never faced a situation desperate enough to force them. Kodai studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Your General Martok called us warriors. I wasn't sure I agreed with him. We're just people trying to save our world. But maybe that's what warriors are, people who keep fighting when there's no good reason to believe they'll win. That is precisely what warriors are, Worf said. And why your crew deserves respect despite the weapon they carry. They stood in silence, 2 warriors from different universes recognizing in each other the same burden, the knowledge that survival sometimes required choices that destroyed the person making them, but that dying with principles intact was a luxury neither could afford when others depended on them. Commander Worf, Kodai said finally, Captain Sisko sent you here to evaluate our tactical capabilities. But that's not the only reason you came, is it? No. I came because I wanted to meet the people who carry a planet-destroying weapon and have not yet used it to threaten their way to freedom. In your situation, most species would have made demands backed by the wave motion gun's threat. You have not. We're not terrorists. Many would say that distinction becomes meaningless when you possess such power. But you maintain it. That is honorable, even if the weapon itself is not. Kodai pulled up another display, this one showing the Yamato's current status, damaged systems highlighted in red, critical repairs marked with priority codes, crew casualties listed with the clinical precision of a command officer who couldn't afford sentiment. Over a third of the crew had died since departure. Another 20% were in critical condition. The ship itself was held together by makeshift repairs and the stubborn refusal of its crew to accept defeat. Commander Worf, I'm going to tell you something that could get me court-martialed by Earth Defense Forces protocols. If my crew knew I was saying this, they'd consider it treason. Kodai's voice dropped. We can't make it to Iscandar. Not in our universe. The damage is too severe, the radiation exposure too advanced, the distance too great. Even if we obtained the Cosmo Cleaner D tomorrow, most of us would die before we could return to Earth. And the ones who survived wouldn't be strong enough to deploy the technology properly. Then why continue? Because stopping means accepting that everyone on Earth dies. That every person we lost along the way died for nothing. That our mission, our purpose, was meaningless from the start. Kodai's hands gripped the console edge hard enough that his knuckles whitened. But in this universe, maybe we don't have to accept that. Maybe there's a path forward that doesn't require us to complete an impossible journey. Maybe the Federation's technology, their resources, their scientific knowledge, maybe that's the answer we've been searching for all along. You would abandon your universe? I would do whatever was necessary to ensure Earth survives. If that means staying here, working with the Federation to develop the technology to cleanse our world even if we never see it happen, then that's what I'll do. But Captain Okita doesn't see it that way. He believes we can return, complete the original mission, die as heroes who saved their world. And maybe he's right. Maybe I'm just a coward looking for an easier path. There is nothing easy about accepting that your mission's original goal has become impossible, Worf said. That requires more courage than blindly pursuing a doomed objective. Before Kodai could respond, the ship's internal communications crackled to life. Commander Kodai to the bridge. We have an emergency. The Yamato's bridge was controlled chaos when they arrived. Captain Okita sat in his command chair looking even more gaunt than before, Dr. Sato standing beside him with a medical scanner that registered readings clearly showing the captain's deteriorating condition. Lieutenant Mori worked her navigation console with intense focus while other crew members called out reports in rapid Japanese that the universal translator struggled to keep pace with. Report, Kodai ordered, sliding into his tactical station. 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships just dropped out of warp, Mori said. They're not approaching Deep Space Nine, they're on an intercept course with us. ETA 7 minutes. Captain Sisko? Okita asked. Already aware, Mori confirmed. The station has launched runabouts and General Martok's ship is moving to intercept. But Commander, the Jem'Hadar are broadcasting something. It's in Federation standard. They're addressing us directly. Put it through. The Yamato's bridge was controlled chaos when they arrived. Captain Okita sat in his command chair looking even more gaunt than before, Dr. Sato standing beside him with a medical scanner that registered readings clearly showing the captain's deteriorating condition. Lieutenant Mori worked her navigation console with intense focus while other crew members called out reports in rapid Japanese that the universal translator struggled to keep pace with. Report, Kodai ordered, sliding into his tactical station. 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships just dropped out of warp, Mori said. They're not approaching Deep Space Nine, they're on an intercept course with us. ETA 7 minutes. Captain Sisko? Okita asked. Already aware, Mori confirmed. The station has launched runabouts and General Martok's ship is moving to intercept. But Commander, the Jem'Hadar are broadcasting something. It's in Federation standard. They're addressing us directly. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge carried the emotionless precision of a Jem'Hadar soldier who had been bred for combat and conditioned to follow the Founder's will without question. Unknown vessel. You carry technology that represents a threat to the Founder's order. You will surrender your ship and crew for processing. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction. You have 2 minutes to comply. Processing, Dr. Sato said quietly. That means assimilation into their forces or dissection for study. They're not getting either, Kodai said. Captain, we should charge the wave motion gun. One shot will eliminate all 3 ships. Commander, Okita said, his voice strained. Captain Sisko specifically requested we not use the wave motion gun while in Federation space. Doing so now would violate our agreement and potentially start an incident that draws more factions into this conflict. With respect, sir, we're already in the conflict. And those Jem'Hadar aren't going to be impressed by our promises to Captain Sisko. Worf watched the exchange, recognizing the fundamental divide between them. Okita represented the old guard, honor-bound, protocol-focused, believing that agreements held meaning even in desperate situations. Kodai represented the new reality, pragmatic, survival-focused, willing to break any rule if it meant his crew lived one more day. Captain Okita, Worf said, the Jem'Hadar do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They will attack, and they will attempt to destroy or capture your vessel. If you do not defend yourselves, you will die. If you use the wave motion gun, you will violate Captain Sisko's trust but survive. The choice is yours to make, but understand, there is no third option where honor and survival both remain intact. Okita looked at Worf, then at his crew, then at the tactical display showing 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships closing in while Deep Space Nine's defenses scrambled to intercept. The old captain's face showed the exhaustion of someone who had made too many impossible choices and knew he was about to make one more. Mr. Kodai, Okita said quietly, prepare to charge the wave motion gun. But do not fire without my explicit order. If General Martok and Captain Sisko can eliminate the threat before we're forced to reveal our full capabilities, we'll let them. But if our ship is in immediate danger of being destroyed or boarded, he paused, the weight of what he was about to say visible in every line of his face. Then you will fire, Commander. And may whatever gods exist in this universe forgive us for the choices we're forced to make. Understood, sir, Kodai said, his hands already moving across his console with the practiced efficiency of someone who had fired planet-destroying weapons before and would not hesitate to do so again. The Yamato's massive wave motion gun began to charge, energy readings spiking across every sensor grid in the sector, and every faction watching suddenly understood exactly what kind of weapon they had been pursuing. Deep Space Nine's operations center erupted into controlled urgency the moment sensors detected the wave motion gun's energy buildup. Warning klaxons blared across multiple consoles, and every tactical display shifted from yellow alert to red as the power readings climbed past anything in Starfleet's weapons database. Captain. Nog's voice cracked with alarm. The Yamato's forward weapon is charging. Energy output already exceeds a photon torpedo spread by a factor of 20 and still climbing. Sisko's hands moved across his command console, bringing up a direct channel to the Yamato. Captain Okita, what are you doing? Okita's face appeared on the screen, and Sisko saw the resignation there, the look of a man who had just crossed a line he'd hoped to avoid. Captain Sisko, 3 Jem'Hadar attack ships are on an intercept course with my vessel. They've demanded our surrender and given us 2 minutes to comply. I'm preparing to defend my ship. By destroying everything in a 50,000-kilometer radius. Sisko's voice remained controlled, but the anger beneath was palpable. Captain, we had an agreement. You said the wave motion gun would remain offline. I said it would not be fired unless the Yamato faced immediate destruction. That condition has been met. Okita paused. But I've ordered Commander Kodai to hold fire as long as possible. If you can eliminate the threat before our charging sequence completes, we won't fire. I'm giving you that chance, Captain. But I will not sacrifice my crew to preserve your political situation. The transmission ended. He's right, Kira said quietly. Those Jem'Hadar aren't going to stop. And if they board the Yamato? Then the Founders obtain wave motion technology, O'Brien finished. Captain, we have to protect them. I know, Chief. Sisko opened a channel to Martok's ship. General, the Yamato is charging its primary weapon. We need to eliminate those Jem'Hadar ships before they force Okita to fire. Martok's laughter boomed through the comm system. Finally. A proper battle. Captain Sisko, coordinate your runabouts with my attack pattern. Let's show these Dominion PTQ what happens when they threaten warriors under our protection. The Klingon Vorcha-class cruiser surged forward, disruptor cannons already charging, as 3 Starfleet runabouts launched from DS-9's docking bays. But even as they accelerated toward the intercept point, tactical sensors showed the Jem'Hadar ships weren't slowing down, they were accelerating, pushing their engines past safe limits in a kamikaze approach that spoke to their genetically programmed loyalty to the Founders. They're not trying to board, Kira realized. They're going to ram the Yamato. Suicide attack. 1 minute to intercept, Nog reported. Wave motion gun charge at 67% and climbing. Sisko watched the tactical display, his mind calculating vectors and timing with the precision that had kept him alive through years of combat. Martok's ship would reach the Jem'Hadar in 40 seconds. The runabouts would arrive 5 seconds later. But the lead Jem'Hadar ship had shifted course slightly, angling away from Martok's trajectory toward a gap in the defensive formation. They're not all attacking the Yamato, Sisko said. 2 are drawing our forces away while the third is heading for the dimensional rift coordinates, O'Brien interrupted, his eyes widening. Captain, that Jem'Hadar ship isn't trying to destroy the Yamato. It's trying to gather data on how they arrived here. If the Dominion learns transdimensional travel. Major, redirect the lead runabout. Target that Jem'Hadar ship before it reaches the rift coordinates. But sensors were already showing another complication. The Romulan warbuds that had been maintaining a respectful distance suddenly decloaked, disruptors charging, their target clear, not the Jem'Hadar, not the Yamato, but the runabout that Sisko had just ordered into the most exposed position in the sector. The Romulans are firing. Kira shouted. Disruptor fire lanced through space, catching the lead runabout's shields and sending the small craft spinning off course. Warning lights flared across the operations center as the runabout's pilot, Lieutenant Ezri Dax, fought to regain control while hull breaches vented atmosphere into the void. Why would they? Nog started. Because they want the Dominion to learn transdimensional travel, Sisko said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. If the Founders can invade alternate universes, they'll spread their forces across infinite realities. The war in this universe becomes a sideshow. And the Romulans, he turned to Kira. The Romulans have been playing both sides. Officially allied with us, but if they can secretly ensure the Dominion becomes distracted by transdimensional conquest. Then the Romulan Empire survives by letting everyone else fight the Founders across infinite universes, Kira finished. That's brilliant and horrifying. 30 seconds to contact, Nog reported. Wave motion gun at 85% charge. On the view screen, the battle unfolded with the chaotic precision of multiple factions pursuing incompatible objectives. Martok's ship engaged 2 Jem'Hadar vessels, trading disruptor fire at point-blank range while his Klingon crew roared battle cries that carried over the comm static. The remaining runabouts attempted to assist the damaged lead craft, but Romulan warbuds had positioned themselves to block any rescue attempt. And through it all, the third Jem'Hadar ship accelerated toward the dimensional rift coordinates, its sensors already gathering data that could doom every universe connected to this one. Captain Sisko. Okita's voice cut through the chaos. Wave motion gun charge at 92%. If I'm going to fire, it needs to be in the next 15 seconds. After that, the energy buildup becomes unstable and we risk catastrophic containment failure. Sisko's mind raced through options that all ended in disaster. Fire on the Romulans and risk igniting a war on multiple fronts. Let the Jem'Hadar reach the rift coordinates and potentially doom countless universes. Order the Yamato to stand down and watch the ship be destroyed. Or authorize the use of a planet-killing weapon in Federation space and accept every consequence that followed. Chief, Sisko said quietly, can you disrupt the Jem'Hadar sensors remotely? Prevent them from gathering useful data even if they reach the rift coordinates? O'Brien's fingers danced across his console. Not at this range and not through their shields. I'd need a direct connection to their computer core or, he stopped, his eyes widening. Or I'd need someone to transport aboard and manually introduce a virus into their system. Transport through their shields. During a battle. The pattern buffers would probably scramble whoever we sent. Probably. O'Brien looked up. Captain, it's suicide. So is every other option. Sisko opened a channel to the operations team. Anyone here have experience with Jem'Hadar computer systems and a death wish? Silence. Then, I'll do it. Everyone turned. Commander Kodai stood at the entrance to operations, having transported over from the Yamato during the crisis. His tactical uniform was scorched from recent combat, and his eyes held the flat determination of someone who had already made peace with dying. Commander, Sisko said, you don't have to. Your Chief O'Brien taught me your transporter systems this morning when we were sharing technical specifications. I understand the risks. And I understand Jem'Hadar protocols from fighting Gamilas forces that operate on similar principles, kamikaze tactics, hive mind coordination, suicide missions for strategic objectives. I can do this. You'll probably die, O'Brien said bluntly. I've been dying for a year, Chief. At least this way it means something. Kodai moved to the transporter console. Captain Sisko, get me aboard that ship. I'll shut down their sensors and their weapons systems. That should give you enough time to eliminate the threat without forcing Captain Okita to fire the wave motion gun. And if we can't beam you back out before the ship is destroyed, then you tell Captain Okita that I completed my mission. That's all any of us can ask for. Sisko looked at this man from another universe who had spent a year fighting for a dying Earth, who had fired planet-destroying weapons at enemy fleets, who carried the weight of 7,000 deaths on his conscience and was now volunteering to die in a war that wasn't his to save universes he'd never visit. Chief, Sisko said, get him aboard that ship. And be ready to pull him out the instant those sensors go offline. Aye, sir. O'Brien's hands moved across the transporter controls. Commander Kodai, I'm linking your communicator to a homing beacon. The instant you complete the mission, tap it twice and I'll lock onto your signal. Don't wait, don't hesitate, 2 taps and I pull you out. Understood? Understood. And Commander? O'Brien met his eyes. Good luck. Kodai nodded once, then stepped onto the transporter pad. The transporter effect was different than anything Kodai had experienced. The Yamato's matter transmission system was crude compared to Federation technology, a brute force conversion of matter to energy and back again that left users nauseous and disoriented. This felt smoother, more precise, but the destination made up for any comfort in the transit. He materialized in the Jem'Hadar ship's engine room, surrounded by bulkheads that pulsed with organic integration into the vessel's systems. 3 Jem'Hadar soldiers turned toward him immediately, their weapons rising with the fluid precision of beings bred for combat. Kodai didn't hesitate, his sidearm was already in his hand, firing the moment molecular cohesion returned. The first Jem'Hadar fell with a blast to its chest. The second tackled Kodai before he could acquire the target, superhuman strength slamming him against a bulkhead hard enough to crack ribs. Kodai brought his knee up into the creature's throat, then fired point-blank into its skull when it staggered back. The third Jem'Hadar charged, and Kodai recognized the wild look in its eyes, Ketracel white withdrawal, the drug that controlled these soldiers running low, turning them into desperate animals. They collided in a tangle of limbs, Kodai's combat training from Earth Defense Forces Military Academy versus the Jem'Hadar's genetically engineered superiority. It should have been no contest. But Kodai had spent a year fighting for survival in deep space, had learned that desperation made people stronger than genetics ever could, and he had nothing left to lose. He got his hand around the Jem'Hadar's throat and squeezed, feeling cartilage crush, then drove his sidearm into the creature's torso and fired until the weapon's energy cell depleted. The Jem'Hadar collapsed, and Kodai stumbled to the computer console, his ribs screaming, blood running from a gash above his eye, but his hand still steady enough to interface with the alien system. The Jem'Hadar computer core was organic in nature, responding to genetic recognition rather than traditional security protocols. Kodai pulled out the virus data chip O'Brien had given him, a program specifically designed to target Dominion biosynthetic systems, and jammed it into the nearest interface port. The ship shuddered. Lights flickered. And the sensors that had been gathering dimensional rift data went catastrophically offline, taking the weapon systems with them. Kodai tapped his communicator twice. Nothing happened. He tapped again, harder, feeling the panic rise as he heard footsteps in the corridor, more Jem'Hadar responding to the intrusion, weapons fire about to pour through the doorway. Chief O'Brien, Kodai said into the communicator, I've completed the mission. Requesting immediate extraction. Static answered him. The transporter effect that should have pulled him to safety remained frustratingly absent. And in the corridor, the Jem'Hadar were breaching the door. On Deep Space Nine, O'Brien's console showed the problem immediately. Captain, the Jem'Hadar ship's hull is degrading from the virus, it's disrupting the transporter lock. I can't get a stable signal through the interference. Keep trying, Sisko ordered, watching the tactical display as Martok's ship destroyed one Jem'Hadar vessel while the runabouts engaged the second. But the third ship, the one Kodai was aboard, was drifting toward the dimensional rift coordinates even as its systems failed, potentially taking an alternate universe's warrior with it when it exploded. On the Yamato, Captain Okita watched his tactical display with the resignation of someone who had just watched his finest officer volunteer for a suicide mission. The wave motion gun remained charged, energy crackling along the barrel, waiting for an order that he desperately hoped wouldn't come. And in the engine room of a dying Jem'Hadar ship, Commander Susumu Kodai raised his weapon toward the breach point and prepared to sell his life as expensively as possible, secure in the knowledge that at least he'd die fighting for something that mattered. Then the transporter effect caught him, and reality dissolved into streams of light and probability, and Miles O'Brien's impossible skill pulled him back to Deep Space Nine half a second before the Jem'Hadar ship exploded in a brilliant flash that illuminated the entire sector. Commander Kodai materialized on Deep Space Nine's transporter pad, collapsed to his knees, and vomited blood onto the deck. Dr. Bashir was there immediately, medical scanner already reading the damage, 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, severe concussion, and radiation exposure from the Jem'Hadar ship's failing containment systems that had nearly killed him even before the explosion. Get him to the infirmary, Bashir ordered, but Kodai waved him off, forcing himself to his feet despite the pain that made his vision white out at the edges. The mission, Kodai gasped. Did it work? The Jem'Hadar sensors are offline, O'Brien confirmed. Whatever data they gathered is corrupted beyond recovery. You did it, Commander. Kodai nodded once, then allowed himself to collapse as Bashir's medical team caught him and rushed him toward treatment. But even as they carried him away, his eyes remained focused on the operations center's viewscreen, watching the battle that continued to rage around his ship. Sisko returned his attention to the tactical display. 2 Jem'Hadar vessels destroyed, the third neutralized. But the situation had not improved, it had evolved into something far more dangerous. Captain, Kira said urgently, the Romulan warbuds are repositioning. They're moving toward the Yamato. Hail them. Commander Toritha's face appeared on screen, her expression calculating. Captain Sisko, the Jem'Hadar threat has been eliminated. However, we observed the Yamato charging its primary weapon to dangerous levels. Clearly this vessel represents an immediate threat to regional stability. The Romulan Star Empire is prepared to offer protective custody. By boarding them? Sisko interrupted. By securing a weapon that has now been demonstrated to pose an existential threat. Captain Okita charged that weapon in violation of your agreement. The Federation has lost its claim to custodianship. The Yamato defended itself against an attack. That's not a treaty violation. Nevertheless, the weapon's existence cannot be tolerated. Stand aside, Captain Sisko, or be considered an accomplice to. The transmission cut off as 3 Cardassian Galar-class warships dropped out of warp, weapons already charged, their positioning suggesting they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Of course, Kira muttered. The Cardassians were monitoring the whole engagement. Waiting to see who came out weakest. Ghoul Evek's face replaced Toritha's on the view screen. Captain Sisko, the Cardassian Union has determined that the vessel known as the Yamato represents a clear and present danger to all civilized species. We are moving to neutralize this threat. Do not interfere. You're attacking a ship under Federation protection, Sisko said, his voice dangerously quiet. We're preventing a catastrophe. That ship nearly fired a planet-killing weapon in inhabited space. What happens the next time they feel threatened? What happens when that weapon is turned against a civilian population center? Evek's expression hardened. This is bigger than Federation-Cardassian relations, Captain. This is about preventing genocide. How noble, Martok's voice boomed across the comm channel as his battle-damaged Vorcha cruiser moved into position between the Yamato and the Cardassian ships. The Cardassians suddenly concerned about preventing genocide. Tell me, Ghoul Evek, is this the same moral clarity you showed during the occupation of Bajorans? When you were performing interrogations of civilians? General Martok, Evek said coldly, this doesn't concern the Klingon Empire. You're threatening warriors I've sworn to protect. That makes it my concern. And if you want to reach the Yamato, you'll have to go through me first. I promise, it will be the last mistake you ever make. The Romulan warbuds adjusted their position, clearly calculating whether to ally with the Cardassians against a common target or maintain their independent approach. The tactical situation was degrading by the second. 6 capital ships in close proximity, weapons charged, each faction pursuing incompatible objectives, and at the center of it all, the Yamato with its wave motion gun still radiating enough energy to destroy everything within 50,000 kilometers. Captain, Nog said, his voice tight with tension, I'm detecting another warp signature. No, multiple signatures. Something big is coming through. Sisko felt his stomach drop. Please tell me that's not Dominion reinforcements, Nog confirmed. I count 7 Jem'Hadar attack ships and 2 Cardassian Dominion Alliance vessels. They're broadcasting a priority Alpha tactical signal, whatever that Jem'Hadar ship learned before Commander Kodai shut it down, they transmitted enough to bring in major fleet elements. The situation had just escalated from dangerous to catastrophic. 9 additional hostile vessels entering weapons range while the Cardassians, Romulans, and Federation forces were already positioning for conflict. And the Yamato, damaged and with a dying crew, sat at the center of what was about to become the largest multi-faction engagement in this sector since the war began. All ships, Sisko broadcast on an open channel, this is Captain Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine. Every faction in this sector needs to stand down immediately. If we engage in combat now, we risk igniting a conflict that will spread beyond. Captain Sisko. A new voice cut through the transmission, female, carrying absolute authority that made everyone pause. This is First Omala Tharen of the Vorta Diplomatic Corps, speaking with the full authority of the Founders. The vessel designated Yamato will surrender itself to Dominion custody within the next 60 seconds, or we will eliminate it and every ship attempting to protect it. This is not negotiable. The Founders have no authority in Federation space, Sisko said. The Founders have authority wherever they choose to exercise it. You have 50 seconds, Captain Okita. On the Yamato's bridge, Captain Okita listened to the ultimatum with the calm of someone who had already accepted his death. His crew watched him, waiting for orders, their faces showing the exhaustion of people who had fought too long against too many enemies. Lieutenant Mori's hands remained steady on her navigation controls despite the fear in her eyes. Dr. Sato monitored the captain's deteriorating vital signs with the helpless frustration of a physician who couldn't save his patient. And at the tactical station, with Commander Kodai absent, a young officer named Tokugawa gripped the wave motion gun firing controls with hands that trembled slightly. "Captain," Tokugawa said quietly, "the gun is still charged. One shot could eliminate the Dominion fleet. We'd have to hope the Cardassians and Romulans don't fire on us in the chaos, but we'd be starting a war that kills thousands, possibly millions, to save our own lives," Okita finished. "No, Ensign. If we're going to die, we'll die with honor, not as mass murderers." "Then what do we do, sir?" Okita looked out at the view screen, at the forces converging on his ship, at the Federation station that had offered them hope and now faced destruction because of that offer. He thought about Earth, his Earth, dying in another universe while its last defenders sat trapped in someone else's war. He thought about his crew, who had trusted him to lead them to salvation and instead found themselves hunted across dimensions. He thought about the wave motion gun, the weapon that had kept them alive and now guaranteed their death. "Lieutenant Mori," Okita said, "plot a course. Not to Iscandar. Not to any destination in this universe. Plot a course directly into the dimensional rift coordinates where we first arrived." "Sir." Mori's voice cracked. "That region is still saturated with unstable chronoton particles. If we enter it at high speed with the wave motion gun charged, the energy interaction could tear another hole between universes," Okita confirmed. "Or it could destroy us instantly. Or it could send us somewhere else entirely." He met her eyes. "But it's the only option that doesn't require us to murder thousands or surrender to people who will dissect us for their research. Set the course, Lieutenant. We're going home. Or we're dying trying." "Aye, sir." Mori's hands moved across her console, plotting a trajectory that violated every principle of safe navigation but offered the only hope, however slim, of escape. On Deep Space Nine, O'Brien's sensors detected the Yamato's engine output spiking as the massive ship began to move. "Captain, the Yamato is accelerating. They're heading directly toward the dimensional rift coordinates." "Okita, what are you doing?" Sisko demanded over an open channel. "What I should have done the moment we arrived, Captain Sisko," Okita replied, his voice steady despite the pain audible beneath it. "I'm taking my ship and my problems away from your universe. You've shown us more kindness than we deserved. I won't repay that by making you die for us." "You'll be destroyed," Bashir said, monitoring the medical readouts from the Yamato. "Captain, your crew can't survive the dimensional stress in their current condition. The radiation exposure, the cellular damage. We're already dead, Doctor. We've been dead since we left Earth. At least this way, we die pursuing our mission instead of as prizes in someone else's war." Okita paused. "Captain Sisko, tell Commander Kodai that he was right, sometimes the best tactical decision is the one that seems like suicide. And tell him that he served with honor. That they all did." The Yamato's engines flared brilliant blue-white as the wave motion drive pushed the ship past safe velocity limits, racing toward the dimensional rift coordinates while every faction in the sector suddenly realized what was about to happen. "They're going to destabilize the entire region," Kira said. "If that much energy hits the rift while it's already saturated with chronoton particles, it could tear a permanent hole between universes," O'Brien finished. "Or it could trigger a subspace implosion that collapses this entire sector. Captain, we need to evacuate DS-9. Now." First Aaron, Commander Torith transmitted on an open channel, "If that ship reaches the rift and detonates, the dimensional cascade could affect Romulan space. This has become everyone's problem." "Agreed," Gul Evek added. All vessels, combined fire on the Yamato. Destroy it before it reaches critical range. Belay that. Sisko shouted, but weapons fire was already lancing through space. Disruptors, phasers, photon torpedoes, every ship in range opened fire on the Yamato simultaneously, unified for the first time in their desire to prevent a catastrophe that would doom everyone equally. The Yamato's shields flared under the assault, ablative armor vaporizing, hull breaches opening along the port side as the ancient warship took damage that would have destroyed any conventional vessel. But the Yamato was not conventional, it was a ship built by desperate people using technology they barely understood, held together by determination and the refusal to accept defeat. Its shields failed. Its armor fractured. Its crew died at their stations as bulkheads collapsed and systems exploded. But it kept moving, accelerating toward the rift, the wave motion gun still charged and radiating enough energy to make reality itself scream in protest. 30 seconds to rift impact, Mori reported, her console sparking, blood running down her face from where shrapnel had caught her. Captain, structural integrity at 18%. We're not going to make it. Yes we are, Okita said quietly, and pressed the ship-wide comm, all hands, this is the captain. Prepare for dimensional transit. It's been an honor to serve with you. For Earth. For everyone we've lost. For everyone we're trying to save. Yamato, forward. The ship's crew, dying, wounded, manning stations that were failing around them, responded with a roar that transcended language, transcended universe, transcended every barrier that should have kept them silent. They had traveled 148,000 light-years. They had fought enemies across their entire galaxy. They had watched friends die and kept moving. They had carried the hopes of a dying world on their shoulders. And now, in their final moments, they refused to go quietly into extinction. 20 seconds, Mori said. The weapons fire intensified. The Cardassians, Romulans, and Dominion forces concentrated every available weapon on the Yamato's engine section, trying to cripple it, trying to stop it, trying to prevent what was coming. 10 seconds. General Martok's ship moved to intercept fire meant for the Yamato, taking hits that collapsed its forward shields, and his voice boomed across every channel, die well, warriors. Die with honor. I'll sing of this day until the halls of Estiovokor ring with your names. 5 seconds. Captain Sisko watched, helpless, as the Yamato crossed into the dimensional rift coordinates with its wave motion gun fully charged and its engines outputting power that no ship should sustain. Impact. Reality tore. The dimensional rift that had been slowly collapsing suddenly exploded into full manifestation, a wound in spacetime that showed glimpses of other universes, other possibilities, other Earths. The wave motion gun's energy poured into it, and the feedback was catastrophic. Subspace rippled like water, sensors across 3 sectors went offline, and every ship in range was thrown backward by a shockwave that transcended conventional physics. When the sensors cleared, the Yamato was gone. And where it had been, the dimensional rift remained, stable, permanent, and showing on every display as a doorway to somewhere else. Yamato, respond, Sisko transmitted into the static. Captain Okita, do you read? No answer came. But through the rift, just for a moment before it collapsed to a stable aperture barely 10 meters across, sensors detected a brief energy signature, wave motion engine output, fading into distance, heading somewhere that wasn't part of this universe anymore. They had made it. Against all probability, against every tactical calculation, against the combined firepower of 4 major powers, the Yamato had punched through to somewhere else. Whether that somewhere was home, or another universe entirely, or just the space between dimensions where they would drift until their dying crew finally succumbed to radiation poisoning, no one would ever know. But they had tried. They had fought. And they had refused to surrender even when the galaxy itself seemed determined to make them. In Deep Space Nine's infirmary, Commander Kodai opened his eyes from the medical coma Bashir had induced for emergency treatment. Captain Okita, he asked immediately. Bashir hesitated, then showed him the sensor readouts, the dimensional rift, the weapon discharge, the disappearance. Kodai stared at the data for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled, a genuine expression of relief that transformed his combat-hardened face into something younger, something that remembered hope. "He did it," Kodai whispered. "That stubborn old man actually did it. He found a way home." "We don't know that," Bashir said gently. "They could have been destroyed in the transit. They could be lost between dimensions. We may never know if they made it," Kodai interrupted with absolute certainty. "Captain Okita promised his crew he'd get them to Iscandar. He doesn't break promises. Even if it killed him, especially if it killed him, he kept his word." Sisko entered the infirmary, his uniform still showing scorch marks from where DS9's shields had nearly failed during the dimensional shockwave. "Commander Kodai, I need to know, did your ship leave anything behind? Any technology, any data, anything that these factions might fight over?" Kodai reached into his uniform and pulled out a data chip, the one containing complete wave motion engine specifications that O'Brien had been studying. He looked at it for a moment, thinking about everything it represented. The weapon that had kept them alive. The technology that had made them targets. The power that could save or doom countless worlds depending on who wielded it. Then he crushed it in his hand, the fragments scattering across the infirmary floor. "Nothing, Captain Sisko. They left nothing behind but a story. And stories can't be weaponized." 3 days after the Yamato's disappearance, Deep Space Nine remained on high alert. The dimensional rift had stabilized into a persistent anomaly, too small for ship transit but large enough to radiate exotic particles that kept every major power's sensors focused on Bajoran space. Starfleet had dispatched science vessels. The Romulans maintained a cloaked presence that everyone pretended not to notice. The Cardassians sent diplomatic protests demanding Federation accountability. And the Dominion watched with the patient calculation of beings who measured time in centuries rather than days. Commander Kodai stood at the window of his temporary quarters, watching the rift shimmer against the stars. Dr. Bashir's treatments had accelerated his recovery beyond anything Earth Defense Forces medicine could have achieved. The broken ribs were healed, the internal bleeding stopped, the radiation damage reduced to manageable levels. But the exhaustion that went deeper than physical injury remained. The exhaustion of someone who had spent a year fighting for survival and suddenly found himself with nothing left to fight for. "Commander?" Sisko's voice came from the doorway. "May I come in?" Kodai nodded without turning from the window. Sisko entered, carrying 2 cups of Raktajino, a Klingon coffee that seemed appropriate for a conversation between warriors. He handed one to Kodai and stood beside him, both men watching the rift in silence for a moment. "General Martok wants to throw you a feast," Sisko said finally. "He's been telling anyone who will listen about your boarding action on that Jem'Hadar ship. Says it was the most honorable thing he's witnessed from a non-Klingon in years." "I was terrified the entire time," Kodai admitted. "I thought I was going to die. That's what made it honorable. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Commander. It's acting despite it." Sisko sipped his Raktajino. "The Federation has made you an offer. Asylum, citizenship, a position in Starfleet if you want it. Dr. Bashir says you'll make a full recovery with continued treatment. You could have a life here. In a universe where my Earth doesn't need saving." Kodai's voice carried no bitterness, just tired resignation. "Where everyone I knew is either thriving or never existed in the first place. Where my entire purpose, everything I've done, everyone I've killed, is meaningless. Not meaningless. Just, completed differently than you planned." Kodai finally turned from the window, meeting Sisko's eyes. "Captain, can I ask you something? When you make decisions that result in people dying, enemy combatants, soldiers following orders, people who might have families waiting for them, how do you live with it?" Sisko considered the question carefully. "I remind myself that the alternative was worse. That inaction would have resulted in more death, more suffering. That command means carrying the weight of impossible choices because someone has to, and pretending those choices don't have consequences is a luxury I can't afford. He paused. But I also accept that some nights, sleep doesn't come easy. That some faces stay with you. And that's appropriate. The day killing becomes easy is the day you've lost something essential to your humanity. 7,000 Gamilas soldiers, Kodai said quietly. I killed 7,000 people with one order. For a year, I've told myself it was necessary. That they were trying to invade our solar system, kill everyone on Earth. That I had no choice. But in quiet moments, I wonder, did they have families? Did they believe they were fighting for something righteous? Were they just following orders from leaders who lied to them about Earth's threat? He looked down at his hands. I'll never know. And that's what haunts me most, not knowing if I murdered innocents or stopped an invasion. Commander, Sisko said, his voice gentle but firm, you did what you believed was necessary to protect your people. The Gamilas Empire made the choice to attack Earth, to bombard your planet with radiation, to force you into a position where extreme measures became the only option. The responsibility for those 7,000 deaths begins with whoever gave the order to attack your world. You were simply one link in a chain of consequences that started long before you fired that weapon. Does that make it easier for you? No. It makes it bearable. There's a difference. Kodai nodded slowly, then returned his attention to the rift. Do you think they made it? Captain Okita and the crew? Chief O'Brien analyzed the sensor data. He says there's an 87% probability that the Yamato successfully transited to another universe. Whether that universe was yours or somewhere else, we'll never know. Sisko joined him at the window. But I choose to believe they made it home. That Captain Okita kept his promise to his crew. That somewhere, in some reality, Earth is being saved by the people who refuse to give up even when the entire galaxy told them it was impossible. I wish I had your faith. It's not faith, Commander. It's necessity. Because if I start believing that courage and determination and refusal to surrender don't matter, that good people can do everything right and still lose everything, then I can't get up in the morning and do this job. So I choose to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewards people who deserve it. They stood in silence, watching the rift shimmer. After a long moment, Kodai spoke again, Captain Sisko, I want to accept your offer. Asylum, citizenship, a position in Starfleet. But I need to ask, if we ever find a way to access my universe, if there's ever a chance to complete the original mission, will you let me go? Yes, Sisko said without hesitation. The day we find a way back to your universe, I'll give you a ship myself if that's what it takes. You have my word. Then I'll stay. Not because I've given up on my Earth, but because I need to be ready when, if, the opportunity comes. Kodai extended his hand. Thank you, Captain. For everything you did for the Yamato. For treating us like people instead of weapons. For giving us a choice when everyone else tried to take it away. Sisko shook his hand firmly. You earned that respect, Commander. You and your entire crew. The Federation is better for having met you, even briefly. In the operations center, Lieutenant Mori worked alongside Nog at the science station, studying the dimensional rift's quantum signature with the focused intensity of a navigator who had plotted courses through hell and refused to accept that this navigation problem was unsolvable. She was the only other Yamato crew member to survive, transported to DS9's infirmary during the final battle when her injuries became life-threatening. Captain Okita had ordered her evacuation personally, and she had spent 3 days oscillating between grief that she hadn't died with her crew and guilt that she was alive while they were gone. Lieutenant, Nog said, his Ferengi ears perking up with excitement, look at this. The rift's quantum resonance is cycling through different frequencies. It's like a door that keeps changing its lock combination. If we could predict the pattern, we could potentially send signals through, Mori finished, her navigator's mind immediately grasping the implications. Not ships. Not people. But data. Information. A message. Exactly. It would take years to establish a stable communication protocol, and we'd never know if anyone received it on the other side, but theoretically. Theoretically, we could tell them we survived, Mori said, tears suddenly filling her eyes. We could tell my brother, tell the families of the crew, tell everyone on Earth that the Yamato fought its way across dimensions and never surrendered. That Captain Okita kept his word. Would that be enough? Nog asked gently. Just a message, with no way to help them? It would be everything, Mori said. Because hope, even impossible hope, is what kept us alive for a year. And if we can give that to the people we left behind, she wiped her eyes. Yes, Ensign Nog. That would be enough. They returned to their analysis, two officers from different species working together to solve a problem that transcended universe, war, and the petty conflicts that had nearly destroyed everyone 3 days ago. In his private office, Sisko recorded a log entry that would be classified immediately upon transmission but needed to be said regardless. Captain's log, stardate 51247.8. The Space Battleship Yamato has departed our universe, destination unknown. Whether Captain Okita and his crew reached their home reality or were lost in the dimensional transit remains unclear. What is clear is that their presence in our universe, brief as it was, reminded us of something we'd started to forget during this war. The Yamato's crew had every reason to use their weapon for personal gain. They could have threatened their way to safety, demanded resources, held the wave motion gun over our heads like a guillotine. Instead, they maintained their honor even when honor seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. They refused to become the monsters their circumstances tried to create. In doing so, they showed us that the principles we claim to fight for, dignity, choice, respect for sentient life, aren't luxuries to be abandoned when things get difficult. They're the foundation that keeps us from becoming the enemies we oppose. Commander Kodai has accepted Federation citizenship and will be joining Starfleet after completing his medical recovery. Lieutenant Mori is working with our science team to potentially establish communication with the Yamato's universe. Both of them carry the weight of their mission, incomplete in their eyes, even if they may have succeeded in ways they'll never know. The dimensional rift remains stable. Starfleet Science has established a monitoring station to study it, and every major power in the quadrant maintains observers to ensure no one gains exclusive access. Section 31 has made it clear they consider the rift a strategic asset. I've made it equally clear that anyone attempting to weaponize transdimensional travel will find themselves in direct conflict with Deep Space Nine, regardless of their political affiliation. General Martok has declared the Yamato's crew to be honorary members of the House of Martok, and has commissioned a Klingon opera about their journey. I'm told it's 17 hours long and features the wave motion gun as a metaphor for the warrior's soul. I plan to avoid the premiere. The Dominion withdrew their forces after the Yamato's departure, but their interest in transdimensional technology remains evident. If they find a way to cross between universes, Sisko paused, the implications too vast to fully articulate. Then the war we're fighting now becomes a footnote to conflicts that will span infinite realities. We'll need to be ready for that possibility. But for now, we rebuild. We repair the damage from the engagement. We treat the wounded. And we remember that somewhere, in some universe, a crew of desperate humans is either completing an impossible mission or dying in the attempt. And either way, they earned the right to be remembered as heroes. End log. 6 weeks later, in a universe that Deep Space Nine sensors could never reach, the Space Battleship Yamato emerged from dimensional transit in a region of space that scanners identified as the Large Magellanic Cloud. The ship was barely holding together, hull breaches sealed with emergency patches, systems running on backup power, crew casualties at 63%. Captain Okita sat in his command chair, too weak to stand, Dr. Sato monitoring vitals that showed a man who should have been dead days ago but refused to stop breathing until his mission was complete. Lieutenant Mori's station, the replacement navigator said quietly. Captain, sensors are detecting a planet matching Iscandar's coordinates. We found it, sir. We actually found it. Captain Okita allowed himself a small smile. Then hail them. Tell Queen Starsha that Earth Defense Forces Battleship Yamato has arrived to accept her offer. And tell her, his voice faded, the exhaustion finally overwhelming even his iron will. Tell her we never stopped believing. The transmission was sent. And on the planet below, in a crystalline palace that had waited for exactly this arrival, Queen Starsha of Iscandar looked up at the battle-scarred warship limping into orbit and whispered a single word. Welcome. Back on Deep Space Nine, Sisko stood at the operations center window, watching the dimensional rift shimmer with its irregular patterns. Beside him, Commander Kodai wore a Starfleet uniform now, red for command track, and carried himself with the bearing of someone who had found a new purpose even while mourning the old one. Do you think they made it? Kodai asked the question he'd asked a dozen times over the past weeks, never quite believing the answer but needing to hear it anyway. I think, Sisko said carefully, that Captain Okita was the kind of commander who makes the impossible happen through sheer refusal to accept defeat. I think your crew was the kind of people who survive when survival shouldn't be possible. And I think that somewhere, somehow, Earth, your Earth, has a chance it didn't have before. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. They stood together in silence, two commanders from different universes, watching a doorway between realities that neither could pass through, believing in possibilities they could never confirm, holding on to hope because the alternative was accepting that courage and sacrifice didn't matter. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that had always been enough. The war continued. The Dominion pushed deeper into Federation territory. The casualties mounted. The moral compromises accumulated. But in the operations center of Deep Space Nine, two officers looked at a dimensional rift and chose to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewarded people who refused to surrender. Whether they were right or wrong, they would never know. But they believed it anyway. And that belief, fragile and impossible and necessary, was what kept them fighting when everything else said to give up. The Space Battleship Yamato's arrival in the Star Trek universe lasted less than a week, but its impact resonated far beyond that brief encounter. The dimensional rift became a permanent fixture in Bajoran space, a reminder that reality was more vast and complex than any single civilization could comprehend. The wave motion gun technology disappeared with the Yamato, leaving behind only stories and sensor readings that could never be fully verified. Commander Susumu Kodai rose through Starfleet ranks with the determination that had carried him across one universe and into another. Lieutenant Yuki Mori eventually succeeded in establishing a one-way communication protocol through the dimensional rift, sending messages that may or may not have reached her home universe, content with the possibility that somewhere, someone knew they had survived. And Captain Benjamin Sisko added another entry to his long list of impossible situations navigated through principle and pragmatism in equal measure. The Yamato's crew, those who escaped through the rift and those who remained behind, exemplified something the Federation sometimes forgot during its long war, that honor wasn't measured by victory or defeat, but by the choices made when every option led to loss. They had carried a weapon capable of destroying worlds, yet never used it for conquest. They had faced impossible odds, yet never surrendered their principles. They had been offered power, yet chose purpose. Whether Captain Okita reached Iscandar and saved his Earth would remain forever unknown to the universe he left behind. But in the end, perhaps that uncertainty was appropriate. Some stories don't need definitive endings. Some heroes earn the right to disappear into mystery, their fates unknown but their courage undeniable. The Yamato had come to the Star Trek universe by accident. It left by choice, choosing uncertainty over surrender, the possibility of home over the guarantee of survival. And in doing so, it reminded everyone watching that some missions are worth pursuing even when success seems impossible. That sometimes, the voyage itself is the victory. That sometimes, refusing to give up is the only triumph that matters.